I want to talk this morning as a marriage and family therapist for just a second about mothers. I think mothers in this culture that we're currently in are under more pressure than mothers have ever been under. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I don't think that pressure on mothers is new. I certainly don't think that this is something that the current generation invented, but I think it's more tangible and it's a different kind of pressure now than it's ever been. Mothering has always been filled with stress and anxiety. I equate the idea of being a mother with the idea of being handed the controls of a 747 without ever being trained how to fly a plane, because really nothing prepares you for it other than doing it. The problem with mothering is when you're handed the controls of that 747, there's a whole bunch of other pilots that have different types of planes who are all standing behind you telling you all the things that you should be doing, and if you would just do it that way, everything would be flying along perfectly smooth and great. I think from my outside man perspective, but therapeutic perspective, I feel a bit like that's what we do to mothers. We give them a lot of noise and a lot of stuff, and it creates this pressure and it's this anxiety that those of us who aren't experiencing it can't relate to. I believe that the digital world and the technology that we've put in our lives has done a number on mothers. Yes, social media and mom blogs, I think, are one of the most challenging obstacles that mothers have to feeling a sense of peace and a sense of comfort, primarily because there's a ready-made measuring stick for everything they're going to do. You can go online and see what everybody else's kids are doing and instantly see what your kids aren't. You can go online and see how well all these other mothers are doing their stuff, and you can feel as though you're missing the boat. And that pressure can be absolutely overwhelming. So much so that I don't think it's a coincidence or an accident that this generation of mothers is experiencing anxiety at an unprecedented rate. That is not my opinion. That is what the data indicates about the experience of mothering in 2020. Those of us who are close to it. I'm a father of two young sons. I'm a therapist who I work with families and couples and mothers and fathers all the time. Those of us who are close to it, grandparents, uncles and aunts and friends, those of us who are close, we want to help. We want to understand it, but we really can't. And here's why we can't understand it. Mothers who raised kids before the internet existed can't really understand the pressures that those digital advantages places on moms. We think it's all just social media, which is what I just mentioned. So stop looking at it, Stop looking at all the other moms, or stop thinking that it's all real and, everything will be fine. So that's kind of the best advice we can offer. And for the record, that's not bad advice. Mothers spending less time on social media would be really valuable. I want to just be clear about that. If you're a mother and you struggle with anxiety, try spending way less time on social media. I think you'll find that it reduces some of your anxiety. But here's the catch. Mothering in this culture and anxiety are not just social media tied. Let me explain what I mean. When kids are sick, what's the first thing that a mom does? Google symptoms, WebMD, and then you find out all the horrifying things that your kid probably has. When they have questions about a developmental observation, so my kid should be doing this at this age, they Google those things and they look online at different opinions. The best ways to potty train. They go online. Those aren't social media. Now, granted, you'll find some social media in there, but that's not just social media. They're good resources, and they're good reasons that people use the internet. They want to learn more things, but in all of those searches, they pick up things that they're not doing, or at least that they don't feel like they're doing. So it's hard to relate to mothers who are going through that experience. So that leaves us dads to rescue the moms, right? We want to relate to that experience, and so we're going to step in and we're going to relate to it. The problem is we don't really understand it either. So let's talk a little bit about the differing experience of mothers and fathers. So I know that this doesn't apply to every man, but I think most of us probably fit somewhere into this description. Our view of our families and of our kids seems to be a bit more macro than our wives, and mom's view is more micro. If the big picture stuff looks right, then we don't really worry too much about the small stuff. We don't really notice when the kids have outgrown their shoes. Mom knows exactly when they outgrew their shoes. We don't tend to notice that. When we take our kids swimming, swimsuit, maybe some sunscreen. We're good. Let's go. When mom does it, it's those two things and then a bag that's packed like you're going to space. So there's multiple swimsuits in case there's an accident of some kind. There's towels. There's pool toys and goggles and snacks and all these things that, like, by the way, that list I just made was because I asked my wife, what would you do if you were taking them swimming? That's what she told me, right? Moms, they think about these things that we don't think about. I'll give you an example of our macro view in my own life. A few years ago, my wife was working as a teacher at the preschool here at Eastridge. One morning, it was my job to get our then 1-year-old ready to go, and then to bring him up and give him to her so I could go to work. I got him there. I checked all the boxes. I did all this. I didn't just do the macro stuff. I did the micro stuff. He was fed. He was happy. He wasn't crying. He was like all being coo and whatever, all that stuff that babies do. He was super happy. He had a cutesy little outfit on or whatever. I even had the space bag that I mentioned earlier that had all the stuff in it. I nailed it. I was on fire that morning in the dad department. And as I handed him over to my wife, she held him and then felt him and then looked at me really strangely. And she said, "Where's his diaper?" He was happy. He was fed. Everything was fine. But apparently, when you don't put a diaper on a 1-year-old, everybody gets all bent out of shape. Like that's a problem of some kind. See? Macro, and she thinks micro. That's kind of the difference between how we view this. So us as dads have a hard time relating to the experience of mothering. When I describe mothering as being super stressful, and when I describe it as being anxiety inducing, a lot of husbands and a lot of dads, I mean, you've heard all that, but you don't really understand it, and you don't really understand why you keep hearing it. This experience is hard. Now, take that micro perspective, right? You watch all these little micro interactions, and you think about all these micro things, and let's apply it to life right now. My wife and I have a situation where she is a stay-at-home mom, and she homeschools. So we homeschool an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. That sounds very like Little House on the Prairie, but for a lot of moms listening right now, that sounds like an anxiety crock pot that's going to just slowly simmer over time. Having to think through every single day in terms of school content and home life and healthy balance is an awful lot, but it's something that we chose. We spent a lot of time preparing for it. We openly discuss it. We knew what we were signing up for, but it's still a challenge every day for our family. It is Mother's Day, so I'm going to say this, even though it sounds maybe too personal to put in a chapel class, but my wife is the most amazing mother I have ever seen, and she works really hard to invest in the decisions that we've made for our family. But there are a lot of moms right now who are in the same boat as my wife, but they didn't choose it. There are a lot of mothers out there who are now stay-at-home moms and homeschool moms, but they never made that choice. That choice was made for them. If you're in that boat right now, I want you to know that I hear you. I recognize your struggle. And what I want to do today is shine a little, maybe deeper meaning on that struggle. Mothers, whether your kids are young and potty training or grown and gone, you have a special, beautiful place, not only in your family, but in God's family as well. Jesus had a mother, and in their relationship, we see some things that might make the struggle of mothers everywhere a little bit more meaningful. And that's what we're going to talk about this morning. Mary and Joseph were very incredibly normal. They didn't have servants. They weren't royalty. They weren't politically connected. Mary was just a girl. They weren't rich. They weren't destitute either. They celebrated the birth of Jesus with a temple offering of 2 turtle doves, which the Gospels tell us was the gift of the poor. So they gave a gift of the poor, but they had enough money to pay. They were just very, very normal. Normal has to get up and go to work every day. Normal has to think about what to make for dinner. Normal is what most of us are, and it's what Mary was. But she had a very abnormal role. She was tasked with raising the Messiah from birth. Parents think about the long-term consequences of their choices. That's what makes parenting so stressful. We worry that every decision is going to be the one that keeps them out of college or that keeps them from getting a job. Imagine that natural pressure, and then add to it that the life you're responsible for is the Savior of all humanity and that God personally chose you to do it. My wife has said to me before when we talk about the birth narrative, she has said before, I wonder if Jesus was a good sleeper when he was a baby, which is a very mom question to ask, right? Mary could answer that question. It's amazing to me to think about that. And the relationship between she and Jesus was beautiful. It was powerful. And it was representative of the most normal mothers in the world, despite her very abnormal circumstances. The relationship that Jesus has with Mary is very much one of mother and son. I want to give you a passage in Luke that illustrates the very personal and normal element of their relationship. In Luke chapter 2, we find a 12-year-old Jesus getting left at the temple. His parents leave Jerusalem and they believe that he's mixed in with the caravan of friends and relatives that are leaving Jerusalem. They discover after about a day of travel that he's not there. So they go back to get him. They search the city, no doubt worried sick. And when they find him in the temple and he's listening and he's asking questions. And it's his mother who addresses him. And she essentially says, "Young man, we have been worried sick." And I've always wondered if she gave the mom snap. And if you are a kid who grew up in church, you know the mom snap. Like, how can you distinguish certain moms' snaps? But man, we could all do it. It's a very mom moment. There's a verse in this passage that sometimes gets overlooked. And I don't want to overlook it because I think it's so beautiful. And I think it encapsulates the experience of mothering. And that's in verse 51. And he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was submissive to them. And his mother treasured these things up in her heart. The very next verse describes Jesus growing into adulthood. In other words, the last words that we read about Jesus being a little boy are, his mother treasured these things up in her heart. For mothers, this is one of the most relatable sentences in the Bible. The sound of their cries, the way they mispronounce words, the goofy things that they do, the times where they make you want to pull your hair out, the hugs, the cuddles. His mother treasured these things up in her heart. It's a beautiful sentence that speaks to the experience of mothers everywhere. But the point that I want you to hear is that their mother and son relationship was very, very real. Mothering is a lot of things. It is love, it is compassion, it's joy, it's hurt, it's disappointment, it's pride, it's a nuanced experience full of the spectrum of human emotions. But ultimately, at its core, mothering is about sacrifice. In its early stages, that looks really different. Mothers sacrifice sleep, although they sacrifice sleep for their kids even in the later stages too. It's just worry instead of functioning. But in the early stages, they sacrifice sleep. They sacrifice their own comfort, their own plans and personal ambitions at times. They sacrifice meals and clean clothes and laundry, and they sacrifice furniture sometimes to raise children. And as the kids grow, sacrifice remains a part of the relationship. Adult mothers of adult kids have to sacrifice being the center of attention. And if they're going to have a happy, functional relationship, oftentimes they have to sacrifice being the loudest voice in the life of the children. It doesn't matter how old your kids are. If you want to just call and ask about their life and ask about how things are going and just listen and show a genuine interest in their life, they'll appreciate it. If you can do it without offering unsolicited advice, they'll really appreciate it. And I'm just going to pause because I know that I speak in this audience to a broad spectrum of ages and life experiences. If you're an adult and you feel like your adult children are not as connected to you as you would like for them to be, is it possible that maybe you haven't yet sacrificed being the center of their world and sacrificed being the loudest voice in their life? I think you find if you can sacrifice those things, there's still room for you. And there's still a valuable role for you to play. But those sacrifices have to be made in order for the relationship to evolve and grow into what that adult connection looks like. That's a type of motherly sacrifice that largely goes unnoticed, mainly because mothers don't like it when I say it. But it's one that I thought was worth pointing out. The point I wanted you to get this morning is that mothering is all about sacrifice. So mothering is all about sacrifice, sacrificial love, the willingness to forego your personal comforts and wants and desires because you just love somebody else that much. In that sacrifice of your own sanity sometimes, you get these moments that you treasure up in your heart. And all of this would have been true for Mary as well. Mary knew Jesus before he was born, in the way that mothers know babies in the womb before they come out. She knew he had a divine purpose. She had been told this by an angel at her conception. But in those growth years, she was collecting things up in her heart just as mothers do. But in John 19, which is going to be our primary text this morning, we get a different picture of what motherly sacrifice looked like. There's not a mother in the world who wouldn't gladly take their kid's place in moments of pain. And I imagine Mary felt that way in the passage that we're going to look at. Jesus has been sentenced to die on a cross. He's been beaten. He's been mocked. He's been humiliated. He's been paraded through the streets after being tortured. And to everyone there, he is a condemned man going through the torture that a condemned man would be going through, except to her. To her, he's her son. Her sacrifice is having to watch this unfold and to be helpless and powerless against it. I don't have words for what that experience must have been like through Mary's eyes. I do wonder at times, as she watched this unfold, I wonder what moments may have been going through her head. I wonder if she was thinking of memories from when he was a baby, times that he bumped his head on a table, the conversations that they would have at night. I wonder if she remembered the sound of his toddler voice. I wonder if she was thinking about the moment when he left home and she knew that things were never going to be the same again. And she knew that they were inching towards something like this. Regardless of what was going through her mind, we do know that she's here. We do know that she's watching. And Jesus is redeeming the world through his torture. He is literally setting humanity free. This is the most important sequence of events in human history. This moment redefines everything that has been and will alter everything that is yet to come. And yet, in the midst of the single most important sequence of events in human history, Jesus pauses because he sees his mother. I'm going to read John chapter 19. I'm going to begin in verse 25. But standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her in his home. We're looking at, in this series, we're looking at face-to-face encounters with Jesus in the New Testament. In this one, the one that we just read, the redemption of all humanity is briefly interrupted so that in the midst of unimaginable physical pain, Jesus can make sure that his mother is taken care of. Mary's relationship with Jesus is beautiful, and there's other moments that we could have explored, but this story, I think, highlights the amazing role that she played and the amazing role that mothers take on. There's just something powerful about the love for a mother. Mary sacrificed for Jesus, not only in the spiritual sense, but in the physical sense as well. All of those sacrifices that I described earlier about sleep and sacrificing to tend to the needs of a toddler who can't tend to himself. Mary sacrificed those things as well. Mothering is about sacrifice. that's what makes that role so significant. And it's in that sacrifice that the love grows and the connection grows, and the meaning grows. And if you stop sacrificing for your kids, the relationship is naturally going to drift away. What makes that sacrifice worth it at times is when it's noticed and when it's appreciated. Hopefully for all of you mothers out there today, that's what's happening in your homes. You're being noticed and you're being appreciated for the role that you play. Hopefully you're reaching out to your own mother if that's possible, to do the same. But if it's not, and if that's not possible for you for any number of reasons, please know that there is no more noble calling than that of mother when it comes to the relationships that we build. Maybe you mother your own children. Maybe you mother other people's children. I have seen that happen a lot, both as a teacher and also here at our preschool and through our children's program. People take on the role of mother. Genetics don't have to be a part of that relationship. But regardless of where your mothering comes in and where your experience of a mother comes in, know this morning that you are loved, you are appreciated, and that your role is so significant that the Lord chose to include multiple moments of its beauty in his own life and in the Bible, and gave us an encounter, a face-to-face encounter that fit really nicely into this exploration that specifically was rooted in the role of mothers. We can learn from each of those moments, as we did this morning. We find countless nuggets of spiritual truth and of encouragement. But the overarching theme in Jesus' interactions with Mary is that Jesus loved his mother, and he honored his mother. And so this morning, we do the same for all of the mothers who are watching this video. Happy Mother's Day, and I look forward to seeing you again real soon.